Hi, Lauren here. A few things to discuss before today's episode. One, there are mentions of both suicide and rape, so if one or both of these subjects are difficult for you, you might want to go ahead and skip this episode. Second, we had some audio issues while recording, so I apologize, especially for the first 10 or 15 minutes or so. Hopefully we can get this all worked out before the next episode. Thanks for listening. Welcome back to Who Are You, a CSI podcast. I am Lauren, and I've seen CSI through and through around 3 to 4 times.
And I'm Nick, and I'm experiencing these episodes for the first time.
And today we are reviewing Season 1, Episode 14, To Have and To Hold. And I want to point out that it is have as in H-A-L-V-E. Paramount Plus thinks that it's to have as in H-A-V-E.
Well, yeah, I didn't know until you posted that on Instagram or Twitter or whatever. The title, I went, oh, and I was like, oh, that's really clever.
Yes, it's supposed to be clever, and Paramount Plus was like, I don't get it. This obviously must be a typo. I'm correcting it. So, original air date of this episode was February 15, 2001. Director is Lou Antonio. Writers are Anthony E. Zeiker, Andrew Lipsitz, and Ann Donahue. All right, so I'll be curious to hear Vegas score. I think I know what Vegas score is for our opener, because unless I missed something, we are in an overview of the burbs, and then we're in the desert.
There's one shot of a casino, and then and then there's a view of the desert. There's a view of like the Vegas suburbs, which I counted, and I wasn't sure because we didn't end up there. Right, so I was like, okay, so this is still extreme scenery, but I felt a little justified because there's a little bit of there's a lot of, for the first time in a long time, and I don't know if I have to rethink how the method of Vegas score should work. We have a lot of on location in Vegas shooting, like some real hallmark places, and I'm like, I mean, I gave it a 2, but like if you asked me to rate the Vegasiness of the overall episode, it's probably closer to a 3. But the official score is still 2, unless there's often a lot of little cut-ins and stuff, and I don't want to be tallying those, but there are a lot of different locations and places I recognize from being in Vegas, and I thought, like, wow, they're really adding this in, and it's certainly, I think, a better way to make the show feel like it's in Vegas. And all I could think is, like, I guess this show is probably shot in California, like the pilot, or Toronto or something, you know what I mean? Like, and now that the show is popular, they have a budget to go shoot some scenes on location. And so you're seeing where they're, but technically they did when Nick met, was her name Christine outside? Christy, yeah. That was like, I think one of the first times we were kind of like on location for sure, and maybe there's a couple others. So maybe that's something I'll look up, is how much shooting they do in each place, because they could be shooting regularly in Vegas for all I know. Yep. But yeah, they definitely played it up on this episode, I feel like. Yes, so the official Vegas score is 2, but it's got a little asterisk next to it because, I mean, I don't want to get ahead of the episode. There's no spoilers here, but when they went to the little Elvis chapel, I was like, wow, they're just going around the world here in Vegas. I'm surprised I was in a scene in the Pawn Stars shop.
I think it was before Pawn Stars.
It's probably around the same. Yeah, it might have been a little before.
So we go to the desert. We see a boy playing fetch with his dog. His dog's name is Sky, an adorable golden retriever. And after a few throws of fetch, Sky brings back a bone instead of the sticks that they were using to play fetch. I always also find it fascinating that people use sticks to play fetch. I'm like, bring a ball with them. What are you doing?
Yeah. It's a great trope, though, for TV shows, movies. I feel like I've seen this 100 times. Throw a stick. Dog comes back. This isn't a stick. You know?
So it's nighttime, because obviously night shift. Grissom and Catherine are at the scene where the bone was found. They identify the bone as being the tibia, and Grissom tells Catherine, because she's kind of going on this diatribe of like, this must be a murder, we need to investigate this, like, bones just don't show up in the middle of the desert. And
she's on team pessimism.
Yes, And that's what Grissom says to Catherine, that, she always expects the worst, and she agreed, she doesn't fight this. And I also had to jot down that there was, such a terrible, bad flex attempt by Grissom here, when he's like, did you know that there's, X amount of bones in the body? And Catherine's like, yeah, of course I know.
I went to the same classes that you went to for years.
We do the same job.
Also,
so, yes, I know. I know that there's 216 bones in the human body.
So, what's really funny about this scene is that I have a science with Nick here, that I feel like real Grissom, if Grissom was a real person, he would know this. It's very improper to say, inaccurate to say a human has 206 bones in their body. Not only do we have a lot of people who might also, for one genetic variation or another, have a slightly different number, but the main reason a lot of people have different numbers of bones in their body is because you're born with 270 bones, and they fuse together through your juvenile life. I don't know what the exact age is, but 16 or something. And so different people get different levels of fusing, and you would count something as a bone or not a bone. There are some vestigial bones that sometimes people have that other people don't have. However, I also have to mention a really hilarious aside that I recently learned, which is that half the bones in your body are in your hands and your feet. And the reason why I know this is because in a live play role-playing game, science communicator Hank Green, who is probably the one who taught me about the fact that there were 270 bones in your body, plays the character who is kind of he's a good person, but he's a big dude, and he hurts people when it's appropriate. And his great form of intimidation is weird science facts. And he was intimidating someone and be like, do you know that half the bones of the human body are in your hands and feet? I wouldn't break every bone in your body. That's too much work. I could break half the bones of your body with very low, with much less effort or something. And I love that. I love that fact now. It's one of my favorite facts just because of the delivery. But it's also terrifying. If you were going to fight someone and you were like, did you know that half the bones of your body are in your hands and feet? You would not want to fight them again. You'd be like, I'm going to run. This person is menacing. Yeah. I wish, as I say, I wish Catherine just flexed back on him. Yeah. They missed
an opportunity there for her to flex back.
Different time. 20 years later, it would have happened.
Yeah. So after this bad flex attempt by Grissom, we go to credits. We then return to Grissom giving out assignments. Nick is going to be working with him and Catherine on the bone found in the desert. Catherine fairly wants to bring Terry Miller, the bone expert, the forensic expert on bones, in on this case, and Grissom's being super weird about it and kind of being hemming and hawing and not wanting to do it. And then Sarah and Warwick get a case of a dead body at a hotel. I like that they had to point out that it is a weird pool, and then there's a 2-second clip of the weird pool. They're like, oh, the one with that weird pool, and they're like, in Vegas, this weird pool. I'm like, with clear sides, you can see people in the pool. I don't think Vegas is the only place that has that.
They put that in because they knew they were shooting on location.
Yes. They
that's probably a real. That's people in California think that's a weird pool. People in Vegas just call it a pool.
That's cool. So we move to a scene with cadets combing the desert. Grissom does another weird Grissom thing where he licks the bone. Oh
God, yes. I wrote that down. I was like, we're just contaminating evidence again.
Yeah.
Now there's DNA on this. Yeah. You want to test for soft tissue? I bet you're going to find some. Well, actually, it was a rock of that particular bone, but
it was. Yes.
Yeah. But if it was a real bone, that was not the way to test it.
No.
Now who's being pessimistic, Grissom? You're just assuming this isn't a bone. I also want to point out that I didn't catch the first time she says it, that these are cadets. And I was and they're bossing them around, and I'm like, I think these guys have probably already been trained on how to do this. And we would see, and they're like, oh, they're all cadets. I was like, oh, okay. Also explains why you can get 20 young guys to spend all day combing the desert, because they spent a long time out there.
They spent a lot of time out there, so we get a nice little montage to illustrate how long they've been out there of, different members of the cadets and of the team finding bones and marking flags where they find the pieces. And then at the very end of it, Grissom and Catherine are talking, And I had to write this down because I was like, this is such nonsense. Catherine was like, oh, we've collected enough bones that we can make an ID before the end of the shift.
Yeah.
What?
Well, Speedy,
What are you talking about? No, you can't. That's not how this works.
They really only needed that one bone they found, which was a completely intact skull. Right?
Yeah, I mean...
With, like, dental records.
Yeah, but...
Yeah.
I just found it absolutely obscene. I was like, no, that's not how this works.
Yeah, it's not how it works. So, you have to actually, test things.
Yes. Yeah. And so then we go to the other crime scene. So Sarah and Warwick arrive at the hotel. We see the weird pool. They enter the room. It definitely looks like there's a party in there. We learn that the victim is a one Darren Pine. The room was registered to Celine Dion, but the bill was actually to a woman named Lynn Henry. So then we go towards one of the, I think, Nick and I were, just talking about this fairly iconic, like, Sarah and Warwick show up at the hotel where they're eating lunch, and they, like, go through the archway.
The Venetian, I think.
I think it's the Venetian.
Yeah.
So they go through, the camera goes through the archway, you see, like, the gondola going through, like, the water, and then you see the ladies sitting down eating lunch together inside of this hotel. This is when we learned that they had thrown a bachelorette party the night before. Darren was the exotic dancer. They say that he arrived at 10. They left at 3 a.m. He was alive and well when they left at 3 a.m. And they do note, though, that Lynn has bruises on her wrist, and she's claiming that she doesn't know how she caught them. She's kind of saying, like, oh, we were all kind of tipsy. I probably just walked into something. And as someone who walks into things and bruises all the time, I would know how I got a wrist bruise.
Also,
like,
not...
I'll give it to you.
Not a lot of wrist first walking going on.
No.
Just reverse T-Rex hands.
Yeah.
Given the way, spoiler alert, she does know how she got bruises on her wrists.
She does. Indeed, she does.
Given the severity of the situation, I would think that you could come up with a better lie, including one that would make plausible sense. Like, yeah, the dead stripper, who is the only other person who's going to corroborate this story or deny it, we had a little fun, and he had to be pinned on the couch at some point. You know what I mean? Like, she could have come up with a million fake reasons that would have just, like, had to go over. So, yeah, if you knew given what actually had happened, I thought they were really ill prepared for anyone to ever show up and ask them questions.
Yes. Like, and the fact that they just left him in that room. Like, maybe you should have dragged him.
You were frozen again.
So we go to Grissom and Catherine assembling the skeleton. Nick is also there as well. Catherine Fairley, as they're working on assembling the skeleton, is asking if they've hit a wall yet, aka, can we bring Terry in to address this? Yep. And then Nick gets assigned to post the jaw on the dental database. So he goes off to do that. And they realize, due to finding jagged marks on the bone, that he was chopped up. And then, crazy enough, one Terry Miller arrives, and Grissom is happy and then very not happy at the same time about this arrival.
Yeah, they have this kind of like she kind of bursts into the mid-conversation, and be like, oh, you could try this. Like she overhears what they're talking about. And then I have a really funny comment when they move to the hall.
Yeah, so then the next scene is Grissom and Catherine in the hallway, and I'd love to hear your comment here. So
Catherine has this evidence toe tag thing on her jacket. It says evidence : and then she's written in black Sharpie foxy. As like,
I didn't notice that.
But then I went back and rewatched the whole scene. She's wearing it, but you cannot read it. They did a really good job shooting the scene with her having this on, but not seeing it, and then it being like really front and center in that hallway scene. Yeah, so she's like labeled herself as Foxy or something. I thought it was very, very tongue in cheek and very kind of funny. I laughed. I literally laughed out loud, and I was like, "Wait, did I miss? Did they comment on this or because I always thought Grissom would have said something, and maybe they had a scene and cut it out or something, but I really like the way they edited it together and showed it, where like you can see it in a few of the shots that it's definitely there on her, because they're both wearing coroner lab coats, which is another weird thing in this episode. They keep wearing other people's uniforms, but you could see it's there, but you can't read it at any point until she's in the hallway, and then it's like really easy to read. And I just thought like that was just a really cool, like it was great. It feels like something her character would do. It was very funny. It's very, but they also had to like go through the effort to like shoot it or at least edit the scene right so that you didn't see it coming. And then meanwhile they're supposed to be having this like real serious, like, oh my god, I can't believe you invited my girlfriend over type conversation. And meanwhile she's finding out that they haven't even like dated. He's like, I think in the scene she's like, were you mad because I invited your girlfriend? He's like, I barely even know the woman.
Yes.
And
yeah.
It's very high school.
Yeah,
it feels
Catherine says something along the lines of like, oh, you didn't want to invite to her just because you had a relationship, and that's when Grissom is like, oh, I barely know her, and it's very high school. And so Grissom returns back in with Terry, and she gives them a grade of not bad as far as assembling the skeleton goes. And then we move to Nick and Catherine making character matches they get a dental match. They get a like response to their dental posting. They make character matches, and they find out that, and I guess this proves Catherine's theory is correct, like they got their ID by the end of the night. The victim is Mel Bennett, a 70-year-old gentleman. Yep.
Well, if he was still alive, he'd be 70. We don't actually know he's died, how long he's been dead for yet.
7 months. I don't know if we know that yet, but he's been dead
we
7
don't
months.
yet. If he was, yeah.
And we then go back to Grissom with... Oh.
I was going to say, we do know that he's older because she finds like calcification on his bones or something. She's like at least 60 years old or something.
I think she says like 60 to 70.
Yep.
And then I'm like, yeah, she's right, because Catherine is a badass. So...
Because she also took osteo whatever class.
Yes. We had the same schooling, Grissom. Give me some credit.
Grissom didn't pick up on the calcification. He was like, oh, huh.
Yeah,
in that scene.
And so we turn to Grissom with Terry, and this is when we learn that an electric saw was used to cut up the body based on the grooves found on the bone. We then go to Warwick with Doc Robbins, and we learn that Doc Robbins asks, like, hey, did any of the women admit to having sex with the victim? He says no. And Dr. Robin informs him that a penile swab shows fresh vaginal cells, so he had sex very close to right around the time that he died. And they also put his time of death, his TOD as it were, at midnight, which... Yep. Awkward, because the lady said that they left him at 3 a.m. and he was fine.
Yep. Which caused me to literally go back and see the timeline again.
Okay.
Which then also made me think, like, again, ladies, you did not think about this one iota about what you would say if somebody showed up after knowing you left a dead body in a hotel room. Is that, why don't we just say it wasn't going well and we left early around midnight, and the guy said, hey, can I just have the room for the night? And we said yes. And nobody would ever know except for the three of you. And instead they lied and said they left 3 hours later. I was like, clearly they've never watched an episode of CSI or a Likewise show, and have any idea that they could generally tell when people die to some level of interest. She was like 3 a.m. and I'm like, if they go around and ask your fiance what time you got back, is he going to say 3:30 in the morning? Is he going to say 12:30? Like, right. Gotta get your story straight. Haven't you ever killed a man before?
Evidently not.
Not. Yes, that's a good pun. I like that. But yeah, I started creating a timeline in my notebook, and I had to go back and watch the scene where they interviewed them, because I was like, didn't they say they left at 3 a.m.? Like, why would they say that if they knew the guy was... Because, like, I didn't actually think that they had killed them yet. That was the moment I was like, oh, okay. These ladies were there. They know how he died.
Yeah.
Oh, and this was not a spot the guest star for me.
Okay.
But the lady, apparently the lady with the bruises on her wrist was in like 50 episodes of Doogie Howser.
Oh, okay. I that did not ring any bells for me.
I thought she looked familiar, and so after the episode, I looked it up, and I was like, well, I don't know. This is not what I thought I knew her from.
Yeah.
So it's not a spot the guest star for me.
Okay, that's fair.
I also really think that the blonde lady looks a little bit like Reese Witherspoon in a few scenes.
Yep.
Scenes. I was kind of curious, like, oh, she maybe like a cousin or something. And yeah, no, it's just
some random lady.
Just stereotypic human features that make you think that two people who have no relationship look what they do. Yeah.
Yep. So we then go to Sarah and Warwick in the interrogation room with the group of ladies. This is where we hear the story that Lynn had sex with the victim. Well, not had sex, that she was raped by him. That she left her purse in the room, went back into the room, he then raped her. And they let her know that she has to go to the hospital for a sexual assault exam. Which comes into play later on multiple times.
This is my only
part of this story.
This is my only prediction that I wrote down for the whole episode.
Okay.
I said, I'm pretty sure this lady is lying for the bride. And that the bride had sex with because that's so, again, very stereotypical, right? But also there's this whole nature of like, why are they lying? Why are they covering up things, right? And I was like, oh, I got to send her thing. And obviously they're going to find out no one has had sex with her, right? Or in the last, I don't know how far they can really tell, but I was assuming the last 24 hours. And so again, not the best planning on this lady's part.
No.
If you know what they're going to find, you're not even thinking about it. But this is my one thing. I was like, she's lying for the bride. But the only thing I assumed she was lying about was the bride had sex. I still really wasn't sure who was and was not in on the actual murder part.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just kind of like, I actually really still think I thought in my head that like it was going to be more like likely, well, like they get there anyways, but like it was going to be like somebody else involved, like the three women didn't do it, but they witnessed it or something, and for some reason they weren't saying anything. But yeah, I didn't write a lot of predictions down, but this one I was like lying for the bride for sure. I was like and I said Tess will reveal it wasn't her, and then the bride will say it was her, kind of thing.
Yeah. All right. I mean, you're right on. And we go back to our other storyline. Jim Brass, Grissom, and Catherine arrive at Mrs. Bennett's house. She informs them that, Mel isn't here right now. He's at the store, and they don't take that at face value. So they put her in the patrol car to talk to her downtown. Because not quite. It wasn't until 5 minutes later that I actually thought this episode was going to go the way it was, and he wasn't just going to come back to the store, and they were going to have to like. There's going to be some weird. I thought there was going to be some weird thing with the dental records. Oh,
I don't know what.
I the wrong person.
Yeah, or like she has dementia and doesn't know that this person isn't her husband.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
Like I had this like whole line of thoughts in my head, but she was so sweet and innocent, and I was like, oh well, this lady didn't kill anybody, right? So like, oh, I wonder how this is going to play out.
Yeah. So we move to Catherine, Grissom, and Jim Brass inside of the Bennett's house. They're kind of looking at the pictures. Catherine thinks that they were good with each other. Catherine and Grissom move to the bathroom. They swab the drain of the tub, which does come back positive for blood, and Jim Brass walks in having found the murder weapon. So... Well,
he's found a reciprocating saw.
Yes. Well, he calls it the murder weapon.
Yes. I mean, they do prove it's the murder weapon immediately after, but...
In the very next scene, yes.
Yes, yeah. I don't think when he walked in, I was like, okay, you think you found the murder weapon. Hey, Jim Brass, he finds a lot of good evidence in garages. Remember he found the whole motorcycle once?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He's a garage evidence hound, except he didn't find the orange jacket.
No, he didn't.
Last episode in that guy's garage, yeah.
No, he didn't take that as key evidence. So we're shown in the very next scene that Jim Brass is correct. He did find the murder weapon because we see Terry sawing a pig. She is using the exact same make and model electric saw.
Thank God for 24-hour Walmarts. Because
I know. Well, it's Vegas, right?
Yeah, I mean, but you're able to get the same blade and reciprocating saw on short notice.
Yeah, they can make it happen. So the marks are consistent, and Terry is also able to make some, I don't want to say assumptions, but they kind of feel like assumptions, on the operator. She is saying that they're unfamiliar with the use of the electric saw, and that they have a weakened nature.
Yes. My favorite part of this is that I get that you're a bone expert, but you're not a power tools expert.
No, I agree.
Or are you? I don't know much about her character. Maybe she's a really big DIYer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because obviously she's probably studied cut bones before and can make some generalizations, but she probably need to know a little bit more about operating a reciprocating saw. Which, by the way, I bought myself a reciprocating saw. It's a very useful saw. It is very difficult to use. That thing is like...
I've never used one, so I don't know. I have no idea.
If the thing you're working on isn't like clamped down, it is not a great time. Yeah, so I everything she said was true. It was just kind of like, but how does she know that?
Yeah, but that's that's kind of where I was going with that one. Was like, it does turn out to be accurate, but like really.
The way they revisit the weak manual dexterity thing later on, I thought was absolutely hilarious. I was like, wait, what? And then I was like, oh, because they're trying to show that her hands are weak when they have her sign something later. We'll get to that when we get there.
Which is pretty soon, actually. Before that scene, we go to Sarah and Warwick back in the hotel room. This is where we learn that there was like no trace of the lamp found on his head, because they originally thought that he died by the lamp being smashed into his head.
Which I also was like, they were like, oh, the lamp. I was like, that lamp is broken, organized on the floor. Why do you think that it was hit over the head of a person 5 feet to the right of it, and then like all the pieces neatly fell? And I think the light bulb was intact.
I think so.
I was like, this lamp is a red herring.
Yeah, you were like, they're trying to lead us down the wrong path.
Yeah, that wasn't a prediction, but the lamp was a red. I was like, I knew right away the lamp was a red herring. But they brought this up in the initial autopsy or whatever review of the body, and it's like a callback to, like, they mentioned this in an earlier episode. It's like the first head trauma doesn't cause bleeding.
Yeah,
you need to like hit them a second time.
It's all the subsequent hits that cause cast off.
Was that the first episode, and is that where the golf club skull scene comes from, where Grissom hits the skull with a golf club?
They were trying to figure out blood splatter. I think one of the first times that we hear that it takes more than one hit. Oh, maybe it is in the first episode.
Yeah,
maybe it is. Maybe you're right.
That's the only reason I brought it up, because I was thinking about the intro scene that we see every time now, and how I was like, oh, it's a great callback to that, because that's, again, this show, kind of above the table talk here. At this point in the show, it's way bigger than it was on episode 1. It's become kind of like a phenomenon at this point. A lot of people are tuning in and watching it. And so there's a lot of like catch up that I feel like the writers have to do. So I try to cut them slack for that. And it's like, oh yeah, we're re-mentioning this science fact that we mentioned earlier this season, because we wouldn't expect all of our audience members to know this. But we're not going to spend a long time on it.
It's that, and we've talked about this before. This is also before streaming is really a thing. So even if you had watched all the episodes, that episode was like 3 or 4 months ago now.
Yeah, there's nowhere for you to go to watch it. There's no way to get access to that episode.
So as they're re-examining the hotel room, Warwick finds the teeniest diamond in the world, according to Sarah. But then he proves by willing to deface hotel property that it's a cubic zirconia and not a diamond.
Well, just like tampering with evidence by licking bones, if you're really sure that you know the evidence, you're not risking anything.
Yeah, you just rock and roll.
At least Warwick is a gambling man,
He is a gambling man. Which,
in a past life.
In a past life, yes. Only not currently, but in the days.
I thought he was reading a gambling magazine when they were handing out the things, but I couldn't tell what it was. I thought it was like a horse. You ever seen like guys at like horse tracks that always have these books with all the odds and stuff?
Yeah.
That's what I thought they were trying to tell that, and then later in the episode, he tries to pretend that he doesn't gamble anymore, and so I wasn't really sure how I was supposed to
interpret that.
Yeah.
So we head back to our other storyline with Jim Brass, Catherine, and Grissom. They are with Mrs. Bennett in the interrogation room. This is where we learn that Mrs. Bennett and her husband never fought. They had a perfect marriage. And after kind of some prodding from the CIS team, she requests an attorney, which we have said this over and over again. innocent or not, get an attorney, but especially if you're innocent, get an attorney. And this is where we see they ask her, okay, like, no problem, get an attorney, but you need to fill out this form. And this is where we see her, like, super shaky hand as she goes to try to fill out this form.
She can't even grab a pen.
Right, yeah, she can't even, like, hold a pen normally. Which I was like, can she really hold an electric saw then?
I actually, the first time I saw this, when I was watching this scene for the first time, thought that the twist here was going to be exactly that. She can't hold the saw. Right. Okay, she can't be a suspect anymore.
Yeah. No, not where it goes. Spoiler.
No.
Not where the story
takes
us. Yeah, she's not a murderer, but she's...
Well, we don't know.
That's true, but if we have to believe her, she is not a murderer. And I think we're supposed to. I think we're supposed to, like, feel empathy for this woman.
I would say I came away from this episode believing she's not a murderer.
Yeah. So we then go to Sarah and Warwick walking to the wedding. As they're heading there, they get the exam, the sexual assault exam results back in, and they learn that Lynn lied, so they call the police to meet them at the wedding because they need to bring the women in. So they interrupt the wedding at one of the Elvis chapels, at one of the Vegas.
I think it's the Little White Chapel.
The Little White Chapel. Okay.
I think that's like the most famous one.
Okay. And so they interrupt the wedding, and they let them know that all the women have to come in for questioning. And go ahead.
I had to ask Tara. I don't know if you don't know, and you're listening to this podcast. Tara is my partner. I said, would somebody plan a wedding in Vegas and go to the Little White Chapel? And she was like, yeah, I think I know people who have done that. And I was like, but they didn't bring like any of their family. And they're like, yeah, that's often why people want to like they don't actually want to elope, but like they want to have that kind of like minimalist elope experience at a venue like that. And I was like, really? And I was like, well, I guess, like there's so many people in the world. Of course there's going to be somebody who wants to, or a decent number of people who want to do that. But I was never expecting them to go to like Elvis marrying you type, Vegas wedding chapel, even though they were getting married in Vegas. But it is also very much in the vein of like, if you're going to have a marriage scene in Vegas, you want it to be in the, wedding chapel with Elvis, right? Yeah. So I was like, it really also, this is the point where I was like, man, the Vegas score in this episode really needs to get bumped up. Yeah. Like this, we had the Venetian Hotel earlier. Now we're in the Little White Chapel. They were on one of the walkways outside of, I think it's New York.
Yep.
Earlier, and I was like, they're really in a lot of places in Vegas in this episode.
It's a very Vegas heavy episode. Vegas scenery.
Yeah.
Episode. So
as I say, stand by for season 2. Once we have a full season and we know what the normal is, then we'll reevaluate the Vegas scoring system.
Okay, that's fair.
For season 2.
So we head back to CSI HQ. Terry is leaving. Catherine, because she again is a total badass, reads the situation and pieces out to give Grissom some alone time with Terry. And Terry apologizes for not returning his calls, but has to admit that it's not her dedication to her work that caused her to not return his call. But then this somehow emboldens Grissom, and he asks her out to dinner, and she accepts. Like, I find this a weird... She basically admits, like, I'm not that into you, and then he's just like, oh, well, do you want to get dinner then?
Oh, that's not how I interpreted it.
Okay, how did you interpret it? 'Cause, like,
I interpreted it like in the very high school way that people... That's why I say I keep referring to this as like the high school romance episode. I felt like when she was saying it, she had like this like trepidation in her delivery, that like what they were trying to say is that I was too nervous to call you back. Because we don't get any information about like what the call was about. Like, you know what I mean? Like the way you don't want to talk to your crush sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And it's like and then he asked her out, and obviously she clearly, it seems like she's excited to go out to dinner. She cancels her flight or whatever.
Yeah, she pushes it back. She books a later flight.
Yeah.
We have a very quick scene with Nick and Catherine where we find out that Mel Bennett was already dead before he was cut up. So order of events is died, then cut up, not still alive while being cut up. We then go to Catherine and Grissom with Mrs. Bennett and her lawyer. I'm very glad to see that she lawyered up. And this is where we learn, and I did not check to see if this is actually true, but there's no law against cutting up a body in Nevada. You can just cut up a dead body, and that's A-okay. I have no idea if that's true or not.
I learned a really cool fact about... So I don't even know if this relates. My guess is it depends what state you live in, but I watched a video where a mortuary guy it was Wired interview questions. So like the things that people type into Google about basically death and bodies. Yeah. And somebody asked the question about like spreading ashes. And once you incinerate a body, the ashes are basically no different than like ground up charcoal as far as the law is concerned. They are no longer considered human remains. But he also, like, in a bunch of questions, he kept being like, it varies widely state to state. So it could be very true that, like, the bones, you know what I mean? Like, it's not a person anymore, like, once you're dead. But certainly at a certain level of processing, like, in almost every state, that person stops being a human and starts just being an object, right? It's what's ever left over. But that definition could vary widely. So I was kind of remembering that during the scene, and I suspect that they probably checked on this. And it probably wasn't. It's one of those things where I imagine if you're a writer for a show like this, whenever you learn a weird fact, you're like, oh, let's make an episode about it.
So this is where we hear the initial story that she cut up her husband's body because she couldn't afford the burial. Jim Brass then walks in, and we have learned that she has been cashing her husband's Social Security checks, which is fraud, which... I found humorous that Grissom seemed almost more in shock about the fraud than her cutting up her husband's body.
Yeah. She's murderers. We run into murderers all the time.
Yeah, but fraud. Woo.
I mean, if you could have been a penniless widow, and instead you wanted to be able to afford groceries and medicine.
Yep. So we have a very short scene with Catherine and Grissom walking and talking. They're eating hot dogs, and we realize that they need to go back to the body, aka go back to the bones, to determine more information around this case. So they collect a sample from the bone. Greg Sanders runs the sample, and presto magic, in 30 seconds we find out...
They get that one machine they put everything in. It does DNA analysis, fingerprints. Yeah, it does
it all. It's amazing.
That's why they spent $1 billion on a needle, right?
Yes, exactly. It's because they have this magical machine. So they find out that he had too much digoxin in his tissue. So he had an overdose of this heart medication called digoxin. And
I know whenever I'm doing like a blood work, I always get my results. They always give me digoxin 0.00 milligrams. Yep. Like that's one of the first things they test for.
Yep. Yeah, totally normal. Totally on the standard talk screen when they're screening is a heart medication called digoxin. So again, magic machine. It knew exactly what to test for. It knew.
It's crazy is that they probably thought at that point in time by like this point in time, we would have machines that could do that, and we still don't have machines that can do that.
We definitely still do not have machines that can do that. No, definitely not. So we head on over to Jim Brass, Catherine, and Grissom at Mrs. Bennett's house with Mrs. Bennett and the lawyer. This is when she says that her husband committed suicide and that she hid the body to not lose the benefits, and she states, I want to give this actress kudos. I feel like she did a very good job here. She said it in a very shaky, sad way that she couldn't even put him out of his misery.
Yeah, I kept thinking about, what's his name, like a guy from the Midwest who helped people commit suicide.
Oh yeah,
Kevorkian or something. Yeah, it's very much like, I feel like that was like, that wasn't so out of like the zeitgeist at this point. That I think, there's a bit of an homage there where it's like, yeah, it's okay for people who are end of life and in suffering and pain to decide that they want to end their life.
Yeah.
But certainly I don't think that, like, I could snuff out a loved one.
No, I don't think so.
If they wanted
I feel like I think we as the audience are supposed to believe her in that she loved her husband so much that she couldn't put him out of his misery, and she had to leave the house while he committed suicide because she couldn't even like be there when it happened. Like I think we are led to believe that she is telling the truth here. And
I'm also laughing that I just used the phrase "snuff out" at myself.
Okay.
Laughing at myself, which I was like, I don't even know where that term comes from.
So the team goes out to talk, and they realize that they have to go with the equivocal evidence, which means if the evidence could go either way, like for or against the defendant, then they have to judge in their favor. So they decide they're going to believe her story that he committed suicide and she chopped up the body afterwards. So Catherine goes in to give Mrs. Bennett the good news, and Grissom leaves because he is late for dinner. We then go to Sarah with the ladies in the interrogation room, and she goes over this fairly long explanation of the clock and bruising and where you sustain injuries during consensual sex versus forced sex.
This seems a little farcical to me, by the way. There's a lot of ways to have sex with another person.
This is also true.
The angle of approach would be wildly different depending on how you did it.
Yeah.
I get the premise of helping versus not helping.
Yeah.
But I'm also in no way am I qualified to actually know whether that's true or not.
Same.
So I just had to roll with it, but my BS meter was a little high. I was like, is that a real fact?
Yeah.
And I was like, or have we bent, like, we turned like a real fact and just muddied the waters a little and used it a little for a TV show.
Yeah. I don't know. This is also not something I did my second watch through of this tonight, and so I did not research anything, but they also find out as part of the exam that Lynn there was no evidence she'd had sex in months, so there's literally no way that she could have been the one to have sex with Darren. This is when Meg the bride-to-be, admits that she was the one having sex with Darren. But she tells a similar story in that, like, she initially it was consensual, but then she saw her ring and she wanted it to stop, and he wouldn't stop, and she grabbed the lamp and hit him with the lamp once and accidentally killed him.
I like that he's like, just once.
Yeah, just once. Dun, dun, dun.
Again, ladies, get your facts together.
Get your facts together.
Also, were you not paying attention when she just explained to you they can tell whether or not it was forceful?
Well, but she does say that at the beginning it was consensual. So
yeah, that just means there's bruises in two places.
Yeah, maybe.
Right? I was like, they're gonna do the exam, lady.
Yeah. That's true.
Also, your husband already knew you were cheating. What are you lying about?
Yeah, I know. So with some additional prodding, we find out that her ring has a real diamond, but her husband's ring is zirconia studded. Bum, bum, bum.
Yes.
Thus, we go to Sarah and Warwick with Meg and her husband Luke in the interrogation room. We see the reenactment where we learn how Lynn got her bruised wrist. It's because Luke grabbed her and was kind of shaking her and asking her where Meg was, and that's how she sustained the bruising. It was actually from Luke doing it to her. And then we see Luke.
How hard are you
I don't know. You don't
arrest this man for assault.
Seriously.
I get your fiance is sleeping with a hooker right now, or I guess he's not a hooker.
Dancer. He's a dancer.
But he did receive money, and they are. I guess you could just have consensual sex with a dancer. So yeah, that's fine. Yeah. But anyways, sleeping with somebody the night before you're about to get married, or 2 nights before, you'd be quite upset. But those were some serious bruises.
Yes. No, I agree. And then we continue with the reenactment. We see Luke throwing the lamp and then bashing Darren's head against the headboard multiple times, but in different spots, which is why blood didn't result, is because he hit him multiple times, but he hit him in different spots multiple times.
Because the fiance he's watched CSI before, so he knows.
Yeah, he knows.
If you don't want a messy crime scene, you don't want to be covered in the guy's blood, so you got to spread the bashing out.
Yep. That's exactly what he was thinking, and I had to laugh that they put both of them in the same patrol car as they're driving away. What is she in the patrol car for? She didn't murder anybody.
Well, first off, not only has she lied to investigators.
She lied to investigators
a number of times. She's falsely accused a dead man of rape. She certainly committed a lot of crimes, but she's an accomplice, right? She she was there. She helped cover it up.
Yeah, I guess
you know what I mean? But also, I don't know if they finished getting married, but soon she will own half of all his stuff. And that might include half of his prison sentence. It was a great shot, though.
It was a good shot.
Because they're doing is when you get married and you get driven away in the getaway car, but your getaway car.
With the cans dragging behind.
It's like that. I also want to say, at this point, we definitely learn why they're getting married in Vegas. Because you have to be a degenerate gambler if your promise ring for your wedding is a dice. That was the most Vegas thing of this whole episode, is this guy's getting married and his ring is a freaking die with five pips in it made of diamonds. And I'm just like, no wonder they're in Vegas getting married. It was so crazy. I was just beside myself. And I was like, I can't figure out if they did this to make the episode more Vegas-y or to make the guy more Vegas-y. But they did both at the same time.
They did both. Yeah. And we then pan over to Grissom and Terry at their dinner. Grissom is surprised that they're having a great time.
I'm surprised. I'm having a nice time.
Were you expecting a bad time?
And this is quickly interrupted, though, by his beeper going off. And we learn that 2 bodies have been found. They need him for insect analysis. There's kind of some back and forth between Terry and Grissom where, Terry's, he acknowledges that she is taking a later flight because of him. So maybe he can, sort of postpone having to go to the scene. And as they're kind of talking this through, his phone rings, he picks it up, he turns, he takes the call, and when he turns back around, no more Terry. Terry is gone.
Wait, what? Wait, I don't think I picked up on that.
What? Yeah, Terry's gone.
I was so confused at the end of the episode, because I couldn't figure out if he was going to the crime scene or not. So, she left, so he wouldn't have to make the decision to not go to work. I missed that.
She left.
I just don't think I thought maybe she wasn't in frame. Even the second time I watched it, I was like, what? I was like, I still don't get this ending.
No, she left.
Oh, God. I feel so dumb. No, what's interesting is they had, I don't know if they said at the beginning of the scene or if it was like the last scene they were in together, where they had like a quote, the way a person does one thing, they do all things or something, which I thought was very poignant. So the whole idea was like, if you are wrapped up in your work, you will always be wrapped up in your work. And so it was an important thing where Grissom had to decide if he would allow his personal life to not always be second fiddle to his work life.
Yep.
And then it seemed like when he was like, take a picture every 2 minutes before I get there, like he was going to stay. And then all of a sudden the thing in it, I went, wait, does that mean he's leaving or he's staying? I didn't get that she had left. That makes so much. I'm literally going to have to go watch it.
Yeah, she left.
Oh man, I watched this episode twice. I can't believe I missed that both times.
Yeah. So.
I think the second time I was just like, I must have already had the preconceived notion. I just missed it the first time.
Yeah, because you had already like in your head.
It was also the end of the episode, so I may very well have just been kind of like, oh, okay, the episode's over.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Mm-hmm. That's fair. But so yeah, she leaves. So I guess after that ending, how do you feel about this episode, Nick?
I guess we'll never see Terry again. She can't possibly be in another episode, could she? No.
We will have to find out.
This episode, I think it's middle of the road for me. It's not awful. I don't know what was up with Nick. He's barely in the episode.
Yeah, he was a C player for sure in this episode.
Yeah. I didn't even think he got an assignment at first, and then I was like, oh, okay, he's helping on this, and then it's like, apparently it took him 24 hours to post a picture to a random dental forum
database.
Yeah, they kind of glossed over how that was working. That felt like another early, you can do everything on the internet moment, and people will just believe it type thing. But yeah, that was fine. I like the storylines. Like, I like the old lady storyline. I like the Bone storyline. there are some silly moments in each of the episodes, but there are some good ones. So yeah, it's very kind of in the middle of the road. There was no real low point for me, but there was no real high point. Right? It's a very safe episode.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. I think this is middle of the road. I think there, Grissom had some chance for like character development and seeing a few more sides of Grissom. We didn't really get that from anybody else.
Yep.
And I like when there's more involvement from more characters in the show. I felt like, again, Grissom had multiple scenes where he kind of got to show his character, and everyone else was just kind of like, meh, they're there. So, yeah, it's okay. Not great. I thought the woman who played Mrs. Bennett did a great job. I think she was a great actress. I think they cast her very well. And I also thought, as I was watching this episode, that I think it's been the same lawyer in almost every episode. When they have a lawyer, it's this lawyer, and I was like, "That's a nice gig to have." Like,
she has been
for CSI.
She has been the lawyer many times. I don't know if she's the best lawyer, but I guess when you're the foil of the main characters, you're always going to have some ups and downs. But I know because she has because I keep checking for guest stars after episodes. She has like a certain like black and white IMDb photo, and it doesn't really look like her because she has like no hair. She's like shaved. She has like a semi-shaved head or something in it. And I was like, I don't remember this character in this episode. Oh, it's the lawyer. Oh, okay. And then you see it the next time she's in an episode, you're like, oh yeah, it's the same lawyer. Okay.
Yeah, it's the same lawyer. Yeah. So I mean, good for her. I mean, get that money, get that recurring roles. So
I've never clicked on her IMDb profile though, so now I'm curious.
Oh, okay.
All right, I lied. Her picture is not black and white. She's just wearing a gray shirt.
Oh, okay. All right.
But.
So we will be back next week with our review of Season 1, Episode 15, Table Stakes. In the meantime, you can find us on Facebook at Who Are You, a CSI podcast. We are also on Twitter, aka X, Instagram, Threads at Who Are You, CSI Pod. Feel free to tag us using the hashtag WhoAreYouCSIPod, or you can add us. We love engaging with you guys. Thanks for those who already follow us and engage with our content. And otherwise, we will see you next week.